Max, thank you so much. Welcome to the session, Leveraging the Shift in Technology Adaptation. Please place your questions in the comments box below your screen. I have been speaking about technology in supply chain and logistics for quite some time. In 2019, we had a good take-up in the area of platforms, data sharing, standardization efforts. But the arrival of COVID-19 requires a fresh look at this development. I think we have reached the stage of enlightenment. We have had the chance to stress test digital solutions, our existing internal systems, new tools. And that will bring a lot of new innovation to the previous and the new technologies. It will help vendors and manufacturers to produce much more solid technology, which all will lead to even a much faster adaptation than anticipated before. Where do we stand in the evolution of the supply chain and logistics industry? As we know, it all started really after World War II, where we put much more structure behind the storage, the handling, and the movement of goods. This helped, to a large extent, globalization. International expansion was based on the back of logistics and supply chains. Then the third industrial revolution arrived with the rise of information and communication technology. We had at the same time also reached a level of volume, a critical mass that allowed us to carve out specific segments in supply chain and logistics and optimize them. One example is the express parcel industry. There we saw developments like the hub and spoke systems, but also the barcode and track and trace. This allowed to have more efficient deliveries, better products, and lower prices. In the phase that followed, we connected this much more. We tightened it up. And this, through much more technology, like the Internet of Things, and more computing power, and more ability to put this all under high-performing platforms. And in the fifth phase, we are now facing a tremendous amount of data, which brings an opportunity to us to have much better visibility and analytics in supply chain and logistics management. Where does the innovation come from? Of course, from startups. And the logistics industry is an exception, because in other industries, the incumbents spend a lot in innovation, not so in logistics. Here, most of the money comes from investors and venture capitalists. And we see that the amounts, that the deal value and the number of deals are practically growing over time. We saw a few dips, and end of last year, we saw also a weaker performance. But the beginning of 2020 was not that bad. A lot of money was attracted by artificial intelligence ventures. In 2019, over $1 billion went to maritime tech. And If we take off the SoftBank investment in Flexport, then, however, the funding in the industry declined by 24%, from $190 million in 2018 to $144 million in 2019. 8% fewer deals were made, but the average deal size increased by 18%, from 2.2 million to 2.7 million. Trade facilitation startups were most attractive to investors compared to ship operation, ship management, and port management ventures. An important fact to point out is that the venture funds dedicated to maritime, trade, logistics, operating around the world rose by 60% in 18 months. The considered areas to watch were API integration, artificial intelligence, and green tech. And I think this is still the case. How did the industry take this in? And I think there were major progress steps made. And one is in the area of standardization. With the creation of the Digital Container Shipping Association, the DCSA, the industry created a body to ensure a much more homogeneous development of technology. And the experiments, the incubators, the accelerators, the startup programs continued. Also, data sharing saw progress. And this driven by individual ports like Singapore, that is massively connected to the world, and other ports, to Hamburg, Rotterdam, both ports exchange data, and through other initiatives like the Port CDM, which is collective decision making within ports. Also, platforms got traction. One example is TradeLens, but there are also many other smaller platforms, for example, in the area of bunker, or to make the life of seafarers easier. Import and export regulations are seen as a hindrance to digitization, no news, and reducing paper across the supply chain remains a priority. Automation made also some progress with interesting projects ahead of us. 2019 was a year of activity consolidation and continuation. I think it was the year where the industry took up the challenge and worked in a practical way on extracting value out of the different fields of technology adaptation. But what is the impact of COVID-19 on the technology trend in the industry? As I said, vendors and users have the opportunity to stress test tools. This will lead to a much more robust base for the post-COVID-19 phase. In respect to regulatory barriers, I expect that they will decline because governments themselves went digital and increasingly offer their services in a virtual way. Venture capitalists are hesitant to invest now. A lot of rounds are postponed. And this puts pressure on underfunded startups. Remote working and operating became a very big topic. And this brought to light some of the weaknesses. And people will work on improving their heritage systems, but also to enhance them with new tools. Automation is another theme because robots don't get COVID-19 infected. The design and footprints and orchestration of global supply chains will again be reviewed, but I don't expect a revolution. I think that we might see a slight acceleration of trends which we have seen over the last 20 years. And those trends are, on the one hand, the move towards more digitization and more services. And today, according to some numbers, there is more services trade and digital trade than physical trade. And then there is the trend towards more localization and regionalization, driven by technology, but also by a more balanced and inclusive world. So I see a big, big push towards technology, towards innovation, towards digitization, and more adapted offerings, solutions, and products will meet an increasingly open market. 5 predictions to sum it up. This is my thesis of the future LogTech market. There will be more automation, more green tech, because the pressure of IMO 2020 and the decarbonization of the shipping supply chain hasn't vanished. More platforms. We will see either more real platform or more platform and system thinking. More platforms bring new business models. Platform thinking bring new operational modes. There will be more data. In, let's say, 3 to 5 years, we will have about 1 trillion connected devices. And we will see more artificial intelligence-driven solutions to deal with the data the connected devices, intelligent devices are producing. The robotics market is exploding. We see it in the full range. We see it in the warehouses, in the air through drones, which were used in the lockdown situation in China to deliver goods. We see it in the space of autonomous trucks and also autonomous ships. But I also want to stress that automation also happens in the sphere of processes. And processes include, for example, the chatbots. Then there is the green tech area. Due to increasing pressure from various sides and the high emissions in the industry, there is a need for technology, a need for digitization, a need for innovation. It starts with making the supply chain more connected, more transparent. That allows for better coordination. That allows that people in the chain know what they have to expect during the day and in the times ahead of them. Then there is innovation in making this all smarter, to have better routing, to have optimized utilization of resources. And then there is the ship. The ship will see a lot of innovation to reduce emissions, also to optimize speed and routing. And finally, there is the automated vessel, which can use and which can be used in a much more efficient fuel, energy, and emission efficient way. And there is, of course, the innovation in fuel, in alternative fuel, which will bring the breakthrough in the shipping industry. New platforms, new technologies. COVID-19 has shown us that we need to build more redundancies into the supply chain. And that will drive new operational models. We will see companies installing cross-docking facilities to build buffers to avoid disruption from congested ports. And we will see also new fields evolving through platforms in the port, which allow to, on the one hand, to showcase the capabilities, the assets, on the other hand, to tap in those, and finally to plug new services, new offerings, new businesses to these platforms, like, for example, 3D printing to enhance manufacturing in ports. And then the big revolution we are experiencing now, and which will only accelerate through COVID-19, is the Internet of Things, is asset tracking and shipment monitoring, is the zoom on each and every part of the supply chain. Because those players that had pushed and installed visibility tools and analytics tools before COVID-19 were much better off. They knew where their shipments and where their assets are. And they can react when they encounter disruption and hurdles. And to do this most efficiently, we need computing power and we need great analytics. And with these analytics, we are able to optimize the supply chain, reduce risk, and stimulate demand. Let's be also aware of the dark side. Crisis times are prime times for cyber criminals. And this for two reasons. First, it is a crisis and everybody is stretched. And cybersecurity needs high attention. On the other hand, we have a lot of remote operating, remote working. And these people work in their private environment, which is probably less protected, cyber protected, than a company environment. Don't forget that we can not only be infected by COVID-19, but also by cyber viruses. What are the main steps companies have to go through? And what is the trajectory they can now accelerate on? First, we have to take paper out of the supply chain. The more paper we take out, the more digital we become. And that enables us to create complete replicas. And the replicas give us the opportunity to analyze, to have data to compare, to benchmark, to optimize, to better steer what we are doing. And this will happen in clearly defined spaces in the supply chain. And then in the next phase, we will connect all these spaces and integrate them across the supply chain. This will allow seamless, frictionless end-to-end visibility and data flow. And it will provide us with the full data lake, the full set of data that concerns us and the supply chain we are looking at. But to analyze this enormous amount of data, we need intelligence, we need analytics. And how can companies now accelerate, capture the momentum? I see a big wave coming towards us. A big wave of digitization, of technology advancements, of opportunity. And we have to prepare to surf that wave. And this companies can do to actively call upon their teams and organize a company-wide and organization-wide initiative a digitization analysis and deployment initiative. And they can ask their teams to look at their processes, to look at the maps, look at the pain points. And we can bring it all together, and with the help of digitization specialists, we can see which new technologies can help us. And we have learned a lot during the current crisis. And then the question is, do we make it ourselves? Do we buy it? Do we partner? Or do we even invest in a startup to get hold of the solution? And during that process, it's important to have your vendor involved, your vendors involved, experts, internally and externally. And to come up with a plan of a much more digitized organization. And along the way, along this process, you can develop a methodology and a way to make this a continuous exercise, continuous iteration, to make sure that the company adapts to what happens outside. This prevents that over the next 20 years, we see the same thing we saw in the past 20 years, that 50% of the Fortune 500 companies disappear. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take your questions.